Thanks for joining tonight for our modular design and construction for architects workshop. I'm Brian Henson. I'm the founder and owner of Bevyhouse. And with me tonight is Corey.
Nice to meet everyone. My name is Corey Worrell. I'm a licensed architect in 2 states, and I joined Bevyhouse as the lead architect. So I do a lot of interface with outside design teams and outside architects when we're doing the feasibility process, and we'll kind of get more into that later in this discussion.
There's a Q&A button somewhere on the screen. I think to the bottom center. You can ask any questions along the way. We're going to go over them at the end of the workshops. And then if you have any questions, I think there's a chat button that our moderator will help you with any questions along the way. But yeah, Q&A tool should be where you want to put the questions. Why are we doing this workshop? Well, we love working with architects. We love doing custom designs. We love doing custom projects. We built this company so that we could do this, so we can make it accessible for architecture firms, for design teams to access modular and deliver to their clients. We have a lot of good stuff to share tonight, but most important is that you leave tonight with your questions answered. So we're going to definitely leave some time for that at the end, like we talked about. So goals for tonight: learn what modular factory-built homes are, what they aren't. How the process works, a little bit about advantages, design parameters, kind of the basic fundamentals of what modular is, which just fundamentally is volumetric spaces completed off-site. We're sitting in one right now inside of our factory. And modular can also be prefab, so some components, most of what we do is volumetric modular. But we're going to go through that, parameters, particularly around shipping and design constraints that have to do with modular. So that way you walk away the total experts on how to do this.
So
let's jump in.
To get into it, Brian kind of touched on it before, but what is modular construction? It's basically factory-built complete modules, very much like the one that we're sitting in currently. It starts to get a little bit more interesting compared to normal construction processes in that there are 2 sets of codes and 2 sets of permits that apply. So you have your IRC/local code that's going to apply, and you'll do a standard kind of permit submission for that. But we'll also do state permits and associated inspections for all the work that happens in the factory. So we'll touch on this a little bit more later, but those 2 happen concurrently. Modular construction is classified as real property, so conventional loans and construction financing all apply. So that's great. It's very different than HUD code, kind of factory or mobile manufactured homes. Exactly. Very different than manufactured homes, which do not meet those qualifications. Along those lines, it's the same or better quality than conventional construction. And a lot of that has to do with the systems and subs and the enclosure that we have here in the factory, right? It's a factory environment, which is very different than the majority of construction. And then finally, one of the things that Brian mentioned that we pride ourselves on is the highly customizable nature of modular construction. And we'll get into that a little bit more. And that is one of the things that you'll find is fairly vendor dependent. But as a custom modular company, it's something that's at the core of what we do.
Absolutely. So some of the benefits, and we're going to talk some high level, then we're going to jump into projects to show how these can apply, but it's almost always faster. We can start earlier. We can build in parallel. Corey's going to talk about that in just a second with the diagram. It can be less expensive than traditional building, especially if it's in the eventual area where the house is going to go is in a high cost area or a low workforce area. We can be saving some money on the construction. It's built in a quality controlled environment, right? We're building this inside, so there's less disruption to rain, snow, weather events, as well as damage that might occur from that.
Risk, yeah.
Because of all of these factors, we have a higher degree of cost certainty. And this is probably the one, along with the time, one of the most important is we can control the costs to a much greater degree. Because we can start sooner, and we have a factory, we can buy all the stuff that goes into the house sooner, right? We don't need the foundations and grading to get done, the framing to happen in order to have a place for the windows to get delivered months after the client signed the contract. Uh, we we can buy those windows right away, right before we've started the concrete work. So we can control the cost. We can uh, place everything on the wall that can be grabbed from the team to be put in the house when it needs to be put in the house. Um,
One of the things along those lines that
yeah,
we talked about before is that although the modular system that we use is highly flexible, it is still a system, and we know the parts and pieces and the way that
right.
it's engineered really, really well. So that gives us this ability to get really excellent cost certainty at a super preliminary
Much earlier,
stage.
yeah, much
Exactly.
earlier.
So aside from cost certainty when applied to the construction contract, we
Mhm.
can also give really good cost certainty early on, like schematic.
Right.
And we've seen that proven out with some of the recent fire rebuilds that we've done where the factory component was within like 300,
Hundreds,
yeah, hundreds of
hundreds
dollars
of dollars on
from the
million
SD
dollar
estimate.
builds from early schematic design,
So
which is keeps projects on track, keeps having to do redesign, keeps having to do re-engineering, right? We want to try to avoid all of that through this system, not as a byproduct of the system. That's why it's built this
totally.
way. One really exciting thing for me is like the amount of waste and emissions that we just don't produce. So we've been able to dramatically cut how much we throw away. It's mainly drywall and packaging at this point. And because we're doing so much of the shipping with big trucks, either our deliveries here or deliveries to the site, obviously with really big trucks, we're able to limit how much time is spent on the freeway, how much emissions there are being produced, and not have to spend all that time and money, right? Um, all of that leads to a much more predictable outcome. And for our clients, for the design teams, to know where we're going from the very beginning and not have as many pitfalls or areas of having to recorrect along the way, because it's a much more defined pathway to get there um, for any design, really, right?
Totally. I can touch on this briefly, but it's kind of one of the benefits that people know best about modular, which is that we don't have to work sequentially when it comes to building the building, right? When you start to build large portions of the building and complete large portions of the building in the factory, you don't have to wait for earthwork, you don't have to wait for grading, you don't have to wait for foundations to begin to install your windows
Mhm.
or your tile or your sprinkler systems, right? And so that's where the major time saving comes in, and you can see that with these two diagrams here. One thing that I'll mention about this is that a lot of our projects actually begin to start even before the local permit is approved, right? We've gotten the first round of comments. We've got a good degree of certainty that the permit is imminent and there aren't major changes. We have our state permit, which technically trumps the local permit. And we can often sign and start construction contracts here in the factory prior to local permit release. So that kind of yellow line there can even start to creep into the permits and approvals because people don't expect this to be true, but the state actually permits very, very quickly.
Way faster.
So there's several projects, some that we have in the factory right now where we're still waiting on local permit and the modules are almost complete. So that's all time that the owner has saved
Mhm.
essentially.
Yeah, it's a way to mitigate that time risk, right? If there's a delay, if there's a holdup, if the school fees take an extra 3 weeks, it doesn't really matter
Yeah,
because we've already started. Right.
totally.
So we want to show some projects that are either underway, recently finished, or will be starting soon. Some of this, this workshop is happening 1 year after the big fires in LA, and so a lot of what we're going to be showing are projects for those areas. We're in one right now.
Yep.
But the goal here is to show how custom modular that it is a thing. You can get the modular efficiency with custom designs. And though we're going to be showing a lot of multifamily and residential, it applies to hospitality, to some degree commercial. We've done some mixed use projects before. We just delivered one last week, but mainly residential tonight. So big house in Montecito. We could do really high end things. We're going to talk on this one a little bit more, where we can do a mix of modular and site construction. This is a project in Hastings Ranch, which is it was a mid-century design originally. There's some architectural requirements for this area. It's a fire rebuild. This one is off screen to the left of us, almost done. It ships out next month, and it's up for a local award right now, actually. Um, this project was completed last year. It's in Big Bear, California. It's on the screen because it shows how we can get a little bit more of a mound design. It doesn't have to be fully boxy, and that it's 3 modules high. So it has a 24-foot vaulted ceiling, which you can kind of see in this rendering, to achieve like this, the style that the architect wanted and the volume that the client wanted. This is a project. There's a lot more modular stuff happening kind of off screen here, but it follows a ridge line, very unconventional shapes, but it's a very difficult to get to site. And some trade-offs in that scenario for a custom project always happen where we did as much as we could with the programming modularly, but this center section was site built. It's a lot of volume, lots of air, not a great way to make that modular, and so you shouldn't, right? So we site built that as, a wall in the front, and a wall in the back, and two small ones on the sides. But we did sneak in a modular pool, which is cool. You want to talk
Yeah,
about
this
this?
one, this is a fire rebuild in the Palisades, which really incredible lot that kind of slopes down to a canyon in the rear that overlooks the Pacific Ocean. This one's got really modern spaces and kind of modern stylings. You can see the front deck up there that kind of overlooks out to the street. And then we've got kind of a terraced series of balconies and a double height volume that all really open up to the canyon in the rear. In this instance, and as is with most of our instances, we'll do the site-built garage
Hmm.
because kind of like Brian mentioned about some of the other parts is it's a lot of air, is not a lot of kind of high trade spaces. So it can be useful for us to just build it there and it actually provides a place for the crane. So
Right.
kind of being flexible about what's modular and what's not gives us the ability to leverage it on as many projects as possible. Few more here. These are all fire rebuilds as well, and we included them on the screen because there's a variety of styles. And I think that architects or design teams that come to us sometimes have a thought about what modular can and should look like. And here we've got a few different designs to show. One is kind of like low slung mid-century with the pool in the front yard. Another is kind of like a Japanese Scandinavian inspired. And then the one on the bottom was the precedent for which was delivered to us by the client was the White House.
Hmm.
And yeah, we're happy to work to any design style and work with any design team to kind of realize the goals. And they're all modular projects, right?
Right.
So we can make all these things work.
Yeah, modular has constraints, right? We have to get the modules down the road.
Yep.
So there are size, length, width, height uh, constraints to some level. We like to think that that's not the biggest constraint, right? It's going to be budget, it's going to be setbacks, it's going to be uh, planning approvals or whatever it might be. It's something to factor in, and that's what we bring to the team. Is to like, how do you navigate around those modular constraints to pull off anything?
So this one we like to talk about with our architectural partners because it's in Sea Ranch.
Hmm.
So this is an example where there's really intense design guidelines. It's an isolated market with a really restricted labor force. And thus it can be a really good fit for custom modular because we can build to the standards of these design guidelines, but we also don't have to be dependent on the one or two contractors up there who do all of the work and who've got a long line. So you can see on the screen there's kind of a diagram of the things that are built on site versus the things that are built in the factory. And here we tried to maximize as much as possible what was going to be built in the factory. So we've got some topper modules there that's shown in the blue. On the left-hand side, you're seeing the foundations, right? Those are always going to be built on site. A couple of patios and things like that. And then finally the seams and the roofing, right? To make all those waterproof connections and help make the um, connections between spaces blend together and not just have a piece of trim over it. We'll do work like that on site. But yeah, it's kind of gives you an idea. And this one was pretty exciting for us because we use a shared Revit model with the
Hmm.
local architect, right? So design architect was overseeing a large portion of the set, a large portion of the design, and we were basically able to work with him directly in the model, even though we're in completely different locations.
Right. So had this one briefly on the screen. This is about a 7,500, 8,000 square foot house, Montecito. In the outlined in red are the modules. So it's a 10 module project. It's still 3,500 square feet of modules, about half 50/50, modular 50/50 site build. So what we wanted to do, kind of what you alluded to, is like where there's a lot of trade activity, where there's a lot of programming in a small space, that's really good for modular bathrooms, kitchens, smaller bedrooms even. And so we were able to capture the guest house kind of off to the left, the primary suite that's kind of like in the center left, and then the bedroom suite off to the right, where the center section is large, vaulted, open, um, and working with the architect and on this particular one, a GC. Oftentimes we're the general contractor. This one has a separate GC. Working with that team, we're able to figure out how much can we do, how much should we do in the factory. So hydronic floors will be in the factory, fire sprinklers will be in the factory, and then a whole bunch will be pushed to the site. But this client's still going to win, even though it's half modular, because it's built into the hillside. It's going to be months and months of shoring, grading, site work, concrete. By the time they're done with that, our mods will be, half the house is already built, and in some cases through finishes, right?
Yep.
The bathrooms will be all done, the showers will be all done, and it gives it a real head start to like um, finish the project in a more compressed time frame.
This one here is kind of a mid-century compound in Malibu, and the owner has two adjacent lots, one of which the primary residence burned on. And so we're working to replace that. And Malibu is a really interesting example for modular, and this kind of compound phenomenon is as well, because there's not a huge labor force, and the inspection in Malibu can tend to drive the construction timeline basically out the door.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot
Very
of inspections
rigorous. Lots of
associated.
inspections.
Exactly, and each one is probably a week delay, if not more. So consolidating work in the factory means that we can really take advantage of the state inspections, right, and their equivalent with the local inspection. And then, yeah,
For inspections, but not time.
for
We get them way
inspection,
faster.
exactly. We get them way faster in the
Yeah.
factory. And so we kind of put this slide up on the screen to show a little bit of how we approached this really high design project from a design perspective, which was how do we still take advantage of modular, all those benefits in Malibu, but have this really expansive public space that opens out to the ocean. So that's kind of what you're seeing on the left-hand side of the section there. And we actually opted to invert the relationship where, at least for the public section, the right-hand side, those are the bedrooms and bathrooms and kitchen. Those are all contained within modules. Those will all ship essentially fully finished, even with the roof sheathing installed. And then on the left-hand side, where it's essentially just a big open kind of pavilion-style room, we're essentially just going to build the floor system and then columns and then drop topper mods on top. And the topper mods will allow us to fully integrate the sprinklers and the lighting, the insulation, all those things. Those are all inspections that we don't need to have in Malibu that we can basically just drop down on site. You can kind of see how the two key into each other, right? So we
Mhm.
really kind of take this design approach to modular and don't try and just fit projects into it. We want to be flexible and want to make sure that the architecture is being expressed, but that we're also still getting the benefits and that we're all making these trade-offs kind of consciously as a design and construction
Yeah,
team.
intentionally, right? So that way, we're getting the best result with the best options that we have available, right?
Yeah.
One type of project that really benefits from modular is going to be kind of what, like Corey mentioned, where there's a workforce that's not a large workforce, or in an area that might be like as a result of that or because of that remote, right? Or where there's some sort of like compound where either the owners don't want to have workers there or limited workers there, or in this case, it's a private school, private boarding school where they want to limit the number of workers on site during the school year, but then also maximize how much can get done in the summer for projects. So
Totally.
it is least disruptive to the school and the boarding students. And so what you're looking at here is a master plan that we collaborated with an architecture firm to design a boys' dorm project and two faculty duplexes. And what that looks like is pretty straightforward projects for the dorms, squares, two rooms in each one, bunk beds and things like that. all trying to reach a certain architectural style that's consistent with the school that's been there for 120 years. And after we went through a preliminary design charrette with the architect, kind of gave the constraints. This is something that we'll often get to provide feedback on. And so this architecture team's really into modular. They listened and they did a really good job trying to like understand how the mods would go. And then what we were able to do is take this and just tweak it a little bit, get the same design, get the same programming, push and pull a little bit to make it as modular friendly and slightly more cost effective. Um, so that when the project's realized, you can see there's this the boys' dorms kind of upper left, what they look like a little bit closer on the right, and then the two faculty duplexes are on the bottom of the screen. And this was all able to be accomplished over summertime.
Yeah. Continuing along the theme of duplexes, we wanted to bring this one up because this was a really tight lot with a really tight budget. Basically a 2,000 square foot total duplex with a smaller unit up front and a larger unit in the back. And for this one, we really tried to follow best modular practices. And you can kind of see them there on the screen and the elevation and the plan, right? And I'll kind of list them now. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the mod lines are uninterrupted, right? So no windows or doors over mod lines. We want to try and consolidate the high trade spaces fully within a module, right? So that's a bathroom or a kitchen. Those will try and live fully within modules, and you can kind of see how the
So
bathrooms
we're
are
going to take
sprinkled
them
in
through
there.
tile, like plumbing fixtures in, tiles in, countertops are in, the whole thing.
Exactly. And that allows us basically to completely finish that whole space and
Mhm.
just drop it on site and just make the connection below and be done. Um, in this instance, we did break a few of the modular best practices, right? And if you kind of look closely, you can see that both of the kitchens actually do span two modules, but there's kind of tricks of the trade that we can use here, right? Both of them, the range aligns with the module line. So the range basically gets slid in, and then you've got a fully complete counter and cabinet assembly on either side.
Completed here.
Completed here, exactly. And then you basically just slide the range in and make that connection once everything lands. One of the last things there, which is where we tend to kind of have to do a little bit of specialty planning for modular, is there's a couple of large spans in these projects, but they were made intentionally, right? And I think that the main idea is like there's always going to be best practices, but ideally it's a blend between best practices and kind of conscious decision making about the trade-off, right? And in this instance, we kind of decided, well, we can solve this with a site drop beam, for instance, and it's actually worth it to have this kind of expansive open space that kind of blends from the ADU detached garage onto the deck into the living spaces. And we were able to make all those choices consciously with the design team.
Mhm. We had mentioned, modular is great for residential. It's really good for multifamily, mainly because the spaces are going to be smaller, opportunity for more repetitive layouts. This particular project we completed maybe 2 years ago now. It's a 22 unit apartment project, courtyard style, 2 stories. We got to this late. And so because of ADA requirements and some site requirements, it really only made sense to do the second floor. Usually we would want to be doing both, but in this case, it still saved time, still saved money. And so we were able to take the existing design and make it modular without actually any changes to the exterior. You can do that in multifamily. We recommend starting sooner, but it hadn't been engineered yet. And so we were able to make it work. And so by doing the second floor, almost actually all modular, and then site building the stairs. Um, this is a 50 unit project that's in design right now. We started the project with the design team as a modular consultant to help de- deliver the design on this project, and ultimately the construction is coming up. Where we, like on this one as an example, it's in a very remote area and it's prevailing wage. And so those two factors mean that like building in the factory is really advantageous. And it allows us as a team to figure out how can we maximize what's in the factory, because everything on site with per diems, prevailing wage, and all that is going to cost dramatically more, right? So it was a whole exercise with the design team and engineering teams, consultant teams to come together to figure out how do we limit, as one of the goals, how much work happens on site, which isn't always the primary goal. On
Totally.
this one, it was. How do we limit what happens on site?
Well, and
Because
like, I think that's a good thing to mention is that like custom modular not only means different styles of homes, right? It means that we can adjust the goals for each project accordingly,
right,
right? Like you said, this one had a really specific goal, minimize site work as much as possible.
right.
Other projects might have, an expressive roof that needs to be built on
Mhm.
site to meet the design guidelines, and we can do both, right?
Exactly. Yep.
This one here is just a quick reference for how we kind of collaborate with architects because again, I think that the best way for us to work with design teams is to get engaged early. And so this is kind of a very initial sketch that we were sending back and forth between a developer who's doing a series of single family homes again after the fire rebuilds. And you can see the plans are super schematic. We've got kind of a general idea of how big they are and the different layouts. And we'll just do markups like this, make a couple of comments, consider moving this window, maybe change this door swing, align this wall with the mod line. We look at the section, you can kind of see, oh, well, if we drop the roof 6 inches, we can fit it within the ship volume. These are all discussions that the earlier we have, the better we can deliver a modular project. So
Right.
we just try and get people involved early, and we try and work as members of the team, right? It's less about these are the strict rules and more about
Mhm.
how can we solve this particular project's
You
problems.
know, a great example back to this project, this multifamily, is one of the things we looked at is um, by taking a much closer look at the overall width, we discovered and we checked the route to where it was needing to go. If we changed the module dimensions by 3 inches, if we were able to find that on some of them, not even every one of them, we did the math and it was going to save over $150,000 on shipping costs by just finding a couple inches on several of the module types in this plan. And so that's really good feedback to have early on
Totally.
because in the client, we gave them the choice to be like, okay, here's how much it's going to take to like solve this problem. Here's how much you're going to save. And it was a no brainer, right? It's going to, okay, save $140,000, right? By going through the design exercise. And because we deliver, because we are general contractors, we work with general contractors, but we'll do a lot of the projects ourselves. We coordinate the shipping and we have our own install team. We're able to like give that feedback as opposed to a third party giving that feedback.
Totally. And this is a great project to talk about. This is a 1,200 square foot ADU in Santa Barbara where access was really, really limited. We had kind of a tight crane pad as up a quite windy road in Santa Barbara. And so we ended up making the modules under 10 feet. You can kind of see how the four of them rack together here. And then going to the next slide, you can see how that responds to the plan. And so exactly what Brian's talking about, because we don't just say that our responsibility stops at the curb outside the factory, it's kind of like we want to make sure that we're doing those due diligence checks early, right, in feasibility or schematic design to understand how the delivery route is going to affect the design. Because ultimately, we don't want to have to spend in that place an extra 150K on delivery when we could spend that elsewhere, right?
Right.
So, and that becomes especially true for single family residences, right? Like
Where
we
the
we want to
budget's
make
tighter.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So this is an example of where we kind of tune the modular size to meet the site's requirements and the access requirements. And you can also see some of the things that we had done here to maximize modular, which is there's an overhanging deck on the exterior, and that basically allowed us to cantilever and put the bearing point for the foundation back from
Because
the
there's a hillside drops off.
usable
Yeah.
exactly edge of the building. So that's really great, and that's one of the big benefits of modular is we've got it actually on this one. It's really easy to just send the kind of bottom plate out or the bottom rim out a little bit further and have that as a cantilever deck or
Mhm.
something like that.
So, a couple more slides. We want to talk about the process, and and then we'll get into Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, hit the Q&A button and drop them in, and then we'll have them up on our screen. We'll read them off and we'll go through them. But a little bit about the process. You want to talk about how we work together with architects
Definitely.
as a design build collaborative.
Totally. And I think that, because we're such a design focused company, I think that our process is very familiar to architects. We still kind of have a schematic, design development, construction document style process. I think that what we want to highlight to our architectural partners is that the sooner that we can be involved, the better, right? Because we're going to be able to provide better feedback, and we're going to be able to kind of give you the tools as a design partner to make the trade-offs between all of the different ways to solve certain problems. So we almost always say involve Bevyhouse early, because it'll kind of produce the best result. We'll typically do what we call a feasibility with design partners, where oftentimes there'll be kind of a schematic plan and schematic elevations, and we'll work collaboratively directly with the design partner and talk about ways that we can kind of maximize modular or talk about the different trade-offs. And that'll often end in a design, or sorry, a feasibility budget. And that's one of the other things we kind of touched on this previously that we offer is that you can get really good idea for what things are going to cost because we have a really because we know our system really well. So our feasibility process will always end with a feasibility budget, and those tend to be quite true, like we had mentioned before, and they give us a lot of cost certainty as we move into the more expensive aspect of engineering.
Mhm.
Going into the later steps of the process, Bevyhouse will often run the structural engineer because we have a close relationship with them and they know our kind of kit of parts. We'll often run the MEP because we have the direct relationship with the trade contractors. We'll do Title 24 again because we really want that to match what gets built in the factory. And oftentimes we'll do the full CD set. This is totally flexible and we work with it a lot of different ways with other design partners. Some are very much like, that was a lot of fun doing the schematic design, like, you guys take it from here, and some, like the one in Sea Ranch, it was very collaborative, and we basically worked in the same model
Mhm.
and made sure everything was up to both the modular and the design standards all the way through.
Yeah, we've structured our design team to do basically what you don't want to do, right? What the architecture firm that we're working with doesn't want to do. Some architecture firms come to us to be their back office because they don't
Yep,
want to have anything to do with that. Others, like you're saying, want to do all of that, and then we will just give the modular input along the way. Our desire there is just to fill in those blanks, not to take work away, but to
yep,
get the project done in whatever capacity makes most sense for you, your clients, and the project.
totally, and because we have our own design team, we've been able to trial what helps move projects along quickly. And so we do have kind of an internal system that we can work to with clients and architects as well. And yeah, we find that kind of front loading some of the decisions and working collaboratively like that to build everything out lets the factory work move really quickly because things get built a lot faster than most people expect
Yeah.
when you don't have to wait for the foundations or anything like
Our
that.
goal is 0 RFIs,
Totally.
right?
Yeah,
So
we
it's
do
a
pretty
goal.
good.
We do pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, before getting to that part, we do still kind of submit for permits like we talked about before, and that's going to be the state permit and the local permit. We'll submit those concurrently. We'll often get feedback from the state sooner and wait until we have the local feedback, bring all those together into a consolidated set, get our final state approval, and then submit for final local permit. And that's that kind of critical point where on a lot of the projects, owners will make the choice to say, well, it seems like we know the factory scope really well. We've got the budget already ready. Let's just move ahead because there's not going to be significant changes coming from the
Yeah.
local
Let's get
permit.
the windows ordered, get the cabinets ordered, start ordering the structure.
Exactly, all the big lead time items. So, yep, that kind of summarizes how we typically work.
Went the wrong way. Okay. I think we're almost getting to the point of wrapping it up and getting to your questions. We do want to. This is kind of like some of our frequently asked questions,
Yeah,
right? So we do want to give the high level on designing for modular. Um, I think the key thing that we stress that I don't feel other modular companies stress, some not at all, but the location really matters, right? There's some places that we go to where, like, if you just designed a 14-foot module as a standard, well, there's like restrictions on highways that are at 11 feet, right? And so that would require a 14-foot module on that 11-foot highway that we deliver to quite often. would require CHP escort, right?
Totally.
And be dramatically more expensive than it needs to be, cause a big deal. It's way less work and cost to have one extra module in certain situations. So we just design them to a smaller width. So knowing where it's going is super important. Investigating that, finding out about that is something that we do early, often before the design team even gets started. But typically modules are somewhere between 10 and 14 feet wide. They can go a little bit bigger depending on where it's going to go, but it gets kind of a lot more complicated.
Yep.
And they can be less, which is fine too. We'll sometimes do 8-foot mods and 9-foot mods. They're typically 30 to 40 foot long. They can be longer. We've done 70-foot mods. But again, it gets a lot. It really starts limiting where they can go. If it's a big, wide open area, that's fine. Height is the big deal.
Yep.
There are bridges out there. We have to go underneath them. Once you start getting off and having to route around every bridge out there because you're above height, it gets very expensive and very time consuming to ship. So roughly 11'6", 12-foot high is what we're trying to shoot for, because trucks are typically 3 feet. And and the max is typically 15, though there's a whole bunch of bridges that are under 15 feet high, or power lines or communication lines and trees are all supposed to be above that, but they're not. That's why you see bridges that have big chunks out of them out of the freeway, because they're lower than 15 feet. As Corey mentioned on one of the examples, rooms can span modules. You don't have to have a room fully fit in a module. And that's how we get around this narrower module problem. It's not a problem because rooms can go past that, right? So, and that's not a big deal at all. And so let's get the bathrooms in the module. Let's have the bedroom span modules.
Yep.
No big deal. We've had some projects that are like 5 and 6 module wide spans going across it. It doesn't matter, right? So as Corey mentioned, best to have the bathrooms, kitchens within a module. Try not to have windows and doors break on a module line. It's solvable. We could break that rule if you absolutely have to. It pushes that work to the site. But if you can get most of them, things like fireplaces, that sort of thing, if you have them right on the mod line, that pushes it to the site. So that mod line really likes to have a wall, right, where the modules come together. And anything, like we've been saying this whole time, you can fuss with it. We could break all those rules, but at some point it's becoming less and less modular. And maybe that whole section just pushes to the site, which might be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to stop there.
Yeah.
There's my contact information. You can reach out. That was really great timing. We were shooting for 5:40.
There we go.
And because we're precise, I'm going to keep talking to say we nailed it at my clock says 5:40 right now. And we want to open it up to questions. So go ahead and hit the Q&A, and we'll try to do as much as we can. So one of the first questions we see is, would I still be the architect of record? And that is yes, right?
Yep,
So
if you like.
yes, if you like, we will often have the engineer obviously stamps the plans. We want you to be fully in control of your project. We sign our sheets, right? So we want to be responsible for our stuff. And we want to collaborate on that so everyone's comfortable knowing what's getting permitted. And then obviously the California rules apply, right? If it's more than 2 stories, if it's more than 4 units, you have to be the architect of record on it. The next question we see is, who submits factory versus site permits? Very good question. We get that a lot.
Yeah, I can take that one. And of course, the Bevyhouse standard is whatever you like. No, we'll often submit the state permit. And then if we're partnering with a local architect, sometimes they'll do the local permit, and sometimes we'll basically just do all the permitting. But by and large, we'll often submit the state permit because we have those relationships and we know the process really well.
Our preference is that you do the local permit, right? You're going to know the local planning requirements. You're going to know the local nuances of the departments there. You might even have relationships with those people. So we don't really want to get involved so much with coastal. We don't want to get involved in these multi-year, sometimes permit processes. Totally. That's you and your client. We want to essentially help with the building permit side. And then we do make that easy because we're gonna like we have that relationship with the state. We're gonna go and get those, make that easy, hand them back to you because you're gonna have to submit those to the local building department. We'll handle those corrections, right, that the state gives
Totally.
us in collaboration with you. So we try to make it as seamless as possible to get it into the local jurisdiction and out as easily as possible. Okay, one question we get asked this a lot. I already have existing plans. This person has a project in Malibu. How do I know if you can build it and do you modify it? So I'll take a stab, then let Corey go. Generally, if it's already been engineered, I don't want to turn away work, but you probably shouldn't redesign because the time frame and the cost to do that are going to offset the time frame and savings we can offer, right? If you're fully down that pathway,
Yeah.
it's usually a good time to have plans looked at if you haven't engineered it. We've taken full plans and re-engineered them for very specific reasons. Um, but generally you don't want to do that because that's such a big time
Yep.
redo. But how do you know if you can build it? How do you modify it? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the first question I always ask is have they been engineered, right? Because that's going to tell us a lot about the project goals. If they haven't been engineered, then we would do kind of just like what we were showing on screen, right? We'd do a collaborative session where maybe you'd send the plans across, I'd do a couple of markups, we'd get on the phone and discuss it. If it seems like the changes are workable or you want to learn more, right, then we talk about a feasibility contract or a pre-construction contract and basically go from there. Yeah, it's meant to be flexible and something that we work together as a team, collaborative.
Yeah, every project's different. Like that two-story multifamily I mentioned, like that one was really easy to convert right into a modular for the second floor. We that project already had to go through a big round of plan corrections from the architect, and so it made a lot of sense to pivot at that point
Mm.
during this plan correction process to take that we have to. They were going to have to do some re-engineering anyway, and so it made sense to go through and do a re-engineer to make it modular. So it does depend, but it's totally possible to do.
Yep.
Can my clients visit their project while it's being built in the factory? Absolutely. We have clients in here all the time.
Totally.
It's
We love it.
actually shocking how little they come, even though we encourage them. So it's really client specific. Sometimes we have some clients that are down quite frequently because they really enjoy it. We think we're pretty cool and nice to hang out with. Some clients like have literally come by like once for the entire build in the factory. So it's always open. It's not open to the public, but anybody that has projects going on. We have two factories, one in Santa Paula, one in Ventura, and they're always open to see for clients and their design teams.
Yeah, we had a client for the house that's off screen over there in yesterday, and she'd actually brought a lot of her friends.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was a really nice time. We kind of taught a lot of them are architects or architecture adjacent. We kind of did a little preview for them as well.
Mhm. Definitely. What info do we need to evaluate my designs for modular? Whatever you have, really, right?
Totally.
So, but basically, that would be floor plans and elevations, right?
And project address, right?
And the address, yeah. So that's actually really important. Before we even really pull out the plans, we pull out the address.
Totally.
Um,
Every week we meet on the
yeah,
addresses.
I would say there's, I don't know what the number is. It's roughly 10% of projects we just can't do. Because we just can't get mods there efficiently, right?
Yep.
Like people ask, well, can you helicopter? It's like, yes, but like at $200,000 an hour, it's ridiculous. It's prohibitive, right? So, um, but it really depends upon the site. Are there power lines in the way? Are there big trees in the way? We can get around those a lot of times. Because we do our own deliveries and set, we know that world really well, and so we want to check that box really early. So we would need the address to check that, and then a basic floor plan elevations is basically it. Let's see. Moving on. How do I get big open floor plans if the modules are limited in size? So, um, We have span requirements like any project does, right? An open span has to have some amount of support, some beam somewhere,
Yep.
right? We like to do what a lot of design firms like to do, which is, enclose that in the ceiling space, if
Cavity. Yeah.
possible, in the ceiling cavity. And if it gets beyond that, then beams start to drop, or we have to figure out some other way to accomplish that. And so that applies to modular, right? So like we can have that same roughly like, I don't know what it is, 18 to 22 foot opening. And so we've had rooms that are like 40 foot by 22 foot wide, spanning 4 modules, right? It's totally possible to do. And but there is a limit, right? So once you get to a house that's 4,000 square feet above, somewhere in there, you start to get much larger volume
Hmm.
spaces. And the one thing modular doesn't do well is volume. We can do it by putting mods on top. Um, that is possible to do, but if it's volume in 2 directions, then it's like there's no structure, there's no support there, and so it doesn't make sense to be modular.
And to that point, right, and to the question that was right before, that's one of the first things we'll tell you. Is just like, oh well, if this is one of the 10% that we can't deliver to, or look, 50% of this project isn't a good fit for modular. Like I come from an architecture background. Brian comes from a high-end residential construction background. Like we appreciate that not everything should be built in one specific way, and we're happy to tell you so.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we can evaluate that really easily.
How long does a project usually take? Are we backlogged? My GC can't take on more work until next year. Couple questions there. How long does a project usually take? It it really depends upon the project type. I think the way that we like to answer that is in relative terms, kind of going back to that diagram that Corey put up with those multiple pathways. So like in a relative basis, what we're able to save on a residence is if we can start in the factory before you've started the site work, then the way we like to put that is instead of starting framing at the end of foundation work, the house is delivered 80% completed, right?
Yeah.
So then it's just, so you skip that whole middle phase of framing, MEPs, drywall, finishes, and then all we're doing at the end of it, right after, right, the standard house will get delivered in a day, sometimes 2 if it's really big. And then all we're doing after that is all the stuff around it and like tying it together, right? So you cut out that whole section in the middle. That could be 6 months on a project, depending upon
Wow.
how big it is. That's the easy way to answer that because every project is specific. Um, the one that we're delivering next month, it was in our factory for 6 months. Um,
November to
Maybe
April.
5.5, something like that. The foundation just got poured. That went straight from permit to grading to foundation. We're going to do some utility works while the foundation cures, and then the house gets delivered in like 2 weeks. So we're able to actually stay on that pathway. We opened a second factory so that we wouldn't be backlogged. Uh, we're not constrained the same way like a local GC is. We're not labor constrained or management constrained because it's like having every one of your projects on the same street, right? So we can manage this whole factory with far fewer people than a GC can at dispersed locations. And so as a result, we end up being just kind of space constrained, but we solve that by opening up our second factory, which we're super excited about. Our next 3 projects are slated to start there, freeing up space here. And because we kind of like are able to move a little bit quicker, we can cycle houses through faster. So send us your projects since your GC's too
Yeah.
busy. Who does the foundation work? That depends. In areas local to us, we offer and are typically the general contractor for the project. So we'll offer a full turnkey construction solution. We'll do all the site work. We'll do the delivery. We'll coordinate the delivery through trucking company and crane company. Our team does the setting of the modules as opposed to a third party, and we'll finish it up. We'll do that. We've done that in Big Bear. We've done that in Mendocino. Most of the time, it's local to our factories: Malibu, Santa Barbara, Palisades, LA. Um, where we don't do the foundations or we're not the GC is where it makes more sense for the client not to have us do that, right? So
Totally.
if it's a little bit too far away, they don't want us to do it. They don't mind having a local GC do that. We're happy to do that. Some of the bigger projects that we do, there's a GC. They're going to be, if they're local to that area, they have a bigger workforce, they have better trade relationships in that area. We're happy to not be the GC. So whatever best fits the project. How much does our feasibility cover?
Yeah, I can take that. And this is one of the kind of interesting things coming from a standard architectural world as I did to Bevyhouse, where we take kind of a sprint round in the very beginning of every project called feasibility. And that is essentially, how do we learn as much as possible about this project so to produce an accurate budget in as little work as possible? Because the reality is the majority of projects have a strict budget requirement and will likely need some adjustment to meet that target. And the sooner you do that, right, when it's just 2 lines on a paper to form a wall as opposed to a fully engineered set of plans, um, that's just a far superior approach. So a typical feasibility will include kind of us going to site, analyzing the delivery and logistics for craning and shipment. It'll involve kind of working with the design team to discuss modular best practices, to talk specific solutions for how we might solve for instances where we're not following modular best practices. Kind of talk about, if you're thinking about the roof or the ceiling, do we want to frame this as a vaulted space or just a truss over the top? Kind of all those different things, and then that'll culminate in a feasibility budget. And that's where we take the design that we've reviewed specifically and break it out and apply cost to it. And kind of like we talked about before, tends to be quite accurate. We have less control over the site work because that tends to be pretty locally derived and it's going to be a little bit further out. But as a design build, we have really good data about especially what happens in our factory, but even the site work that we're doing. So those are the kind of 3 major things that a feasibility will include: a kind of the logistics check, modular check, scope identification, and then finally a budget that basically brings all those things together in a quite specific fashion.
Yeah, you've heard us talk a lot about a budget, and whether it's $1 million project or a $10 million project, it's what our clients talk about. It's what I'm sure you're used to hearing, and we want to be very respectful of that. And so we really wanted to get into that. Construction costs, I think I read a report recently, on average, nationwide over the last 3 or 4 years have gone up like 35%, right? It's absolutely ridiculous. Most clients don't understand how expensive construction is.
Yeah.
And even though we're like more efficient, that I joke around is like we're just a slightly more efficient form of ridiculous. And so if we know what that primary constraint, the budget's going to be early, we can avoid having to backtrack. We can avoid having to redo and put money into that should go into the project. That leads to a frustrated client. We want a happy team on a linear process, and we don't like sawzalls and demolition tools, right? Because that means we've done something wrong and we're working backwards. It's the same idea with design.
Yep.
Last question I think we see is, do we have subs in-house? We do. We have a mix of subs of trades that we do with our team that's growing. We do a lot of work with outside teams that have been vetted to work with us. They know our system and they come back and keep working with us because they've got it figured out. It's a little bit similar to regular construction, slightly nuanced. It takes some figuring out. And we like to work with those repeating trade contractors so that way we can work together to figure out how can we deliver this more efficiently and get their input to figure out how they could help us go faster, lower the cost, better quality. We're just about out of time. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks for your really good questions.
Yep.
This webinar is recorded, so it'll probably be live on our website or our YouTube channel in a couple weeks once we get it tuned up. And stay tuned. We've got a couple more of these coming up as well that we're super excited about. And feel free to reach out to us at any point in time, directly to me. I'll put you in touch with the right person that can answer the question or answer myself. And send us over your modular project. Let's figure it out.
Excited to talk about it.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.